One bright day, a young man came across a child on the road who had a strange object in his hands. The boy touched the cheek of the fair-haired girl, who was holding something tightly in her hands and did not want to give it to the stranger. After asking the girl to give up the stone she was holding, the protagonist offered her a lollipop in exchange. The child disagreed, claiming that the stone required 2 lollipops, since the boy only had 1. The young man took the stone from the girl, after which she cried, which the guy did not like. Taking the stone between 2 fingers, he looked through it at the sky, wondering about its value. The green-eyed boy found it strange when he noticed blood flowing from his finger. The stone suddenly glowed bright red and emitted lightning, creating an incredible spectacle. The blue-eyed boy was completely bewildered as he saw how the stone seemed to be directing light. The boy tried to throw the stone away, but it seemed to stick to him despite all his efforts. Falling on his back, he felt as if something had pushed him and he could not get to his feet because of some invisible force. Having accepted his fate, the hero looked at the sky and realized that this day was very strange. A blue glow appeared around him, and he couldn't even move to figure out what was happening. His eyes began to glow and hurt, and then emit blue light and lightning. After recovering, the young man felt severe pain in his eyes and did not understand what had happened to him. Noticing that the stone had disappeared from his hands, he decided to turn around and head down the road. The main character saw a rockfall that hit the car and didn't know what to do. When the boy closed his eyes, the collapse and the car disappeared, raising suspicions. A blue-eyed boy decided that his eyes predicted the future after seeing a car on the road. Realizing that the only solution was to stop the car, the hero walked out into the middle of the road to force it to stop. The car began to slow down, and the most important thing for the guy was saving the lives of those in it, so he shouted for the driver to stop. People approaching in a car shouted at the guy to get out of the way, but he insisted on his own and did not back down. The car stopped, and a beautiful girl got out of it, who obviously did not approve of the main character's actions. The green-eyed guy explained that he stopped the car, warning about a possible collapse. The girl tried to hit the young man, but he easily dodged, and she thought that he might be into martial arts. Suddenly, a landslide hit the road with a roar that echoed throughout the area. The girl asked how the guy knew about the upcoming landslide and was shocked by what was happening. Another girl got out of the car and asked Xiaoya to be less strict with the stranger who saved their lives. The pink-haired girl introduced herself as MOU and thanked the boy for saving her. The guy said it was nothing special, but seeing how beautiful MOU was, he felt a little embarrassed. Xiaoya asked the guy about his identity and offered to give him a ride, to which he agreed. The green-haired guy felt awkward in the car with 2 beauties and couldn't relax. Do you notice that his eye allowed him to see through objects, including MOU's clothes? The driver asked the guy why he had been looking at Yushue for so long and fell in love with her. And MOUshue was embarrassed. And do you apologize for not introducing himself? And said his name. The beauty decided to watch the road, still a little embarrassed by the guy's behavior. The guy asked to stop the car as it was a stop and politely said goodbye. Xiaoyu gave him a phone number and told him to remember to call if he needed anything, promising to treat him like sister. The main character responded to the girl's words in kind and said goodbye once again, happily walking down the street, because now he had a new ability. Do you notice the landlord Annie on the street who was in a hurry to go somewhere and saw a green... The boy, not understanding how such an object emitting a negative aura ended up in his aunt's possession. The woman went to a pawn shop hoping to sell the item, but it was only valued at 800 yuan, and the aunt was shocked by such a low valuation. Since Chenny inkstone, made of fine clay mixed with yellow granules, and priced it at 800 yuan, which was a reasonable price. The guy approached the woman and asked what she was doing there. Could he look at the writing brush? And do you realize that he needed this stone to leave here and decided to come up with a plan? An idea popped into his head, and the guy asked how much the woman wanted for the stone and promised to pay the rent later. The aunt asked for 3,000 yuan for the inkstone, and the boy wondered if he could afford that price. He thought she was deliberately raising the price, so he couldn't buy it, but the guy had enough money. The guy with green hair replied that he expected the price to be higher and was ready to purchase the item right away. The man with the monocle could not stay away and asked why the guy decided to help this old woman. Yu decided to ignore the man and listen to the plump woman who asked where the money was, warning him not to bully her. The guy turned around and ordered the lady of the house to follow him, promising that he would now bring the money and give it to her. After successful payment, the main character took the stone and the stationary knife in his hands. Even though it was his last money, he hoped that it would not be spent in vain. Carefully removing something from the stone, the green-haired guy tried to understand what was there. Inside was a piece of unusual jade, and when the young man took it out, he injured himself. The jade began to glow and activated, releasing lightning that hit the guy right in the eye. Yu felt his body suddenly relax, and a blue spiral formed under his feet. The blue-eyed boy looked at his hand and noticed that it was covered in blue lines, and the wound on his finger had disappeared. The protagonist suggested that his left eye had acquired the ability to heal both his own and other people. The green-haired guy decided to check the price of jade on the internet to see how much he could get for it. Yu was delighted when he saw the price, and thought that after selling the jade, he raised his hand and enthusiastically declared that he would buy himself. For example, a young man walked into a pawn shop and offered to appraise a jade stone. The man smiled and said that the quality of the jade was no longer the best, so he priced it at 5,000 yuan. The hero realized that they were trying to deceive him and refused to sell for such a small amount. The merchant was a little nervous and asked the guy to wait a little, then offered 50,000 yuan. Now Yu was interested in this offer and turned to the man, who stated that it was a reasonable. The green-haired guy sat calmly in the store and drank tea, like a real aristocrat. The man said that this gemstone was of high quality and had a unique phoenix color, but the pawnbroker took out his phone and called, and after a short wait, the stranger answered the call. The rich man warned on the phone that if he did not like the stone, he would have to pay the merchant a lot, and the merchant asked him to invite Master Wang, who was more competent and experienced. After finishing the phone conversation, the man said with a smile that this man was very rich, and if he liked the jade stone, he could ask for more money. Yu wanted the jade stone to be sold at its real value, and promised the man 1 point in his agency if that happened. The man clapped his hands and told the protagonist to leave everything to him. The rich stranger drove up to the pawn shop, then went inside and asked where the thing the fat man was talking about was. The merchant approached the white-haired guy named Xiaoshan and announced that he was finally here. The man said that the green-haired guy was selling this thing, so they should negotiate with him. Xiaoshan asked the boy to take the item out of his pocket so he could evaluate it. Du confidently took out the jade from his pocket and held it out for inspection. Master Wang immediately realized that this was a very rare and valuable thing when he saw the jade and began to study it. When Wang put the stone to his cheek, he became touched, and the heroes standing nearby noticed this. Xiaoshan told the boys not to worry, since Master Wang always reacted like this to good finds, and he really liked. The protagonist told the merchant that his friend was a good person and why he hadn't introduced them before. The plump man introduced himself as Hao Shuai, and the white-haired guy who stood next to him looked like Mo Xiaoshan. The green-haired guy also introduced himself and extended his hand as a sign of new acquaintance. They went outside, and Xiaoshan took the blue-eyed guy by the shoulder, saying that they were now friends, and the rich guy invited them to go to his house for dinner. The friends came to the rich guy's house, and Du saw that the house was huge and belonged to a very rich family. When they entered the house, Du saw that the inside was very spacious and stunning. 3 guys sat down at a table, and they decided to discuss a deal with a jade pendant. The blue-eyed boy asked how much his jade pendant was, showing interest in its price. Xiaoshan announced that the jade pendant was worth at least 500,000 yuan, and if the guy had no objections, then let him provide his bank card. Du was amazed by the amount and agreed, after which he gave his card number. Hao Shuai suggested simply sending the card number over the phone for ease of money transfer. The rich guy said it was okay. He remembered the number. The white-haired friend assured Du that he could feel at home. They were like brothers now, and he had nothing to worry about. The blue-eyed boy thought that Xiaoshan had a great character and agreed with his friend's opinion. A notification arrived on the phone about a transfer of 200,000 yuan to the green-haired guy's account. Du walked confidently behind his new acquaintances, thinking that they might become his close friends. When they went outside, the protagonist said goodbye to Xiaoshan, and the rich friend invited him to come again when he had time. So the white-haired guy decided to walk his friends back, and on the way they noticed some people gathering in the yard. Xiaoshan approached them and asked if it was Elder Zhu and if he had time to meet his father. Elder Zhu replied that he had something to brag about to his father. The friend said that he also had something, introduced his new friend Du, and said that he had an antique. The old man took the pendant in his hands and noticed that it was not simple jade. The rich friend said that he had not yet decided how much to sell it for, and asked the elder for help. And Xiaoshan decided to introduce the people sitting on the street, because Du was his friend, and it would be impolite. The black-haired man in the tie turned out to be the next secretary of Jiangnan City, and the gray-haired old man sitting. When the white-haired old man took the jade in his hands, he said, "Return to Fengyi." Zhu confirmed that this jade is Gui, the Fengyu that Kangxi. Hao Shuai asked what Gui was. Fengyu. Du replied that Kangxi, when he was young, secretly went to Weifu. Later, a relationship developed between them, and he gave her a piece of jade that he had kept for a long time and asked her to take. The old man looked at the young man and said that not many young people today know about this. He asked Du where he was from, and Zhu was very curious to know where the boy heard these stories. The blue-eyed boy said that he was from a remote small village in Luo County, Jiangnan City, and Zhu had often visited Qingshui City and asked the hero. The protagonist asked the elder if he had any acquaintances in the village of Dawang, since he himself was from this village. Zhu was shocked and asked if Du Hong knew Wanli, whose old house is in the eastern part of Dawang village. The guy with green hair replied that he knew Hung Wanli, who adopted him. The old man was surprised by this answer and asked if Hung had told the protagonist about Dwayne. Yu replied that his grandfather had not said anything, and the boy decided to find out what was going on, that something had happened to the Zhu decided to remain silent and told the hero not to worry. Nothing terrible had happened. Zhu smiled and laughed, saying that it seemed like he was the monkey Hung was talking about. The protagonist wondered why Grandpa Hung called him a monkey and why he didn't know about it. Zhu stood up and said that it was rare to meet an old friend, especially in a place like that. The elder hugged Yu and said that although Hung was no longer there, Hao Shuai and Xiaoshan watched this with surprise. They were a little confused about what was happening. The bald old man gave him a contact number and told Yu not to hesitate to contact him, as he and old Hung had been friends for many years. The boy with blue eyes was delighted and said that it was wonderful. His eyes. Night fell and the city lights filled the streets with their light. People were hurrying somewhere, as if fate had arranged a secret meeting for them. A cheerful atmosphere reigned everywhere. The friends and Dee were sitting at a table in some establishment and talking about something. A waiter approached them, and Xiaoshan ordered some skewers and a keg of beer, to which the short-haired man. The waiter also offered them soybeans, and the guy agreed, and the man shouted to bring the order to table 18. Old man Zhu wondered why Hong didn't tell the blue-eyed boy anything about Dawang village, and it was an unusual village. Hong didn't have time to tell Yu to live a good life, and now that he's dead, his old friend is committed to taking care of him. The focus then shifts to the green-haired guy and his friends, who are being served soybeans by the way. The guys were amazed by the beauty of the waitress, which caused them admiration and delight. Yu notices Ning Fei from Jiangnan University walking towards them, and he heard that she was from a good family, so he didn't understand why she was. Hao Shuai sees his green-haired friend looking at the girl and realizes that he is up to something. The brown-haired guy compliments the beauty and asks if she has someone special, as he would. He points his hand at the protagonist and asks what she thinks about his friend, who is young, rich, and tall. Yu is a little embarrassed and thinks that this guy is completely out of his mind to speak so bluntly. The protagonist is a little embarrassed and explains that his friend was just joking. The girl is also confused, but asks if they need anything else, and how Shuai orders a plate of exquisite flowers. The friend laughs at the green-haired guy and jokes about his blushing face, calling him still a little boy. Xiaoshan asks why Yu didn't try to approach her if he liked her, and wonders if he knows the girl. Yu replies that he doesn't like her. She's just their school friend. He's only seen her in a photograph. The waiter brought a whole plate of meat and announced that these were the flowers they had ordered, blooming and rich. The green-haired guy asks what it is, and Hao Shuai explains that it is a chicken and the title of the song is Chrysanthemum Terrace, performed by Jay Chou. The guy spits out his food in displeasure and asks if they allowed him to eat it. But friends just laugh and say that this is the most valuable part of the chicken's body. In an alley, the guys surround the girl, acting aggressively. Ning Fei is very scared and warns that she will call the police if they don't leave. The blue-eyed boy feels a sudden sense of alarm and turns around to see what is going on. Yu sees her being besieged and runs outside, noticing that she resembles Ning Fei. The guy shouts at the attackers and approaches them, and they turn their attention to the main character. The green-haired guy finds the place and asks what they are doing with his girlfriend. He is confident in his abilities and waits for the reactions of strangers, while Ning Fei is shy. The villain mocks, asking what a little boy is doing saving a lady, and demands. The protagonist defends the girl and says that Ning Fei shouldn't worry. He will help. The girl suggests calling the police so that nothing happens to them. Du claims that there is no need for the police. He can deal with these men easily. His eyes began to glow as he activated his precognitive ability to deal with the men. The blonde man charged forward, not wanting to watch the green-haired boy show off. Du anticipated the attack and avoided a simple blow. He then hit the man hard in the chest, and his expression showed that he felt pain. The villains were shocked, and the blonde guy grabbed his sore spot. He shouted, asking why the others were not doing anything, and called on them to help beat up. The men laughed and ran towards Du, promising to see how many he could beat up. They approached him, and one of them said that he would be happy to watch the main character run away. Du deftly dodged the blow and used his agility to kick the man hard. In response to the attack, the guy hit the man hard in the face, who fell and did not move anymore. The green-haired boy avoids a kick from the man in the tank top, amazed that he was able to dodge his attack. The protagonist immediately counterattacks, hitting the villain in the leg, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the ground with a thud. The stranger in the t-shirt asks the guy how he predicted his punch, wondering why he wasn't taught that. The blue-eyed guy smiles, noting that his 6-second precognition with his left eye is. Ning Fei is surprised and thoughtful, not expecting Du to be able to fight and have such strength. Continuing on her way, the girl thanks the guy for saving her and expresses. The guy just smiles and notes that it wasn't difficult for him. He's always ready to help. Du wonders how Ning Fei knows his name and is pleasantly surprised by the impression he made on her. The green-haired boy hears someone calling him and turns around to see his friends. Du is okay, as they heard from the waiter that he was fighting with bandits. Hao Shuai noticed that there were unfamiliar men lying on the ground and asked if the green-haired guy had dealt with them. The friend asked why Du did not warn them about his actions, and they were concerned for his safety, so they called for help. Du explained to his friends that he had not expected such a development, and that he was simply lucky to have dealt with it so easily. Ning Fei told the protagonist that she called her friend to pick her up. She expressed her gratitude to the green-haired boy and said that it was time for her to leave, saying goodbye to everyone. The main character smiled and agreed. Hao Shuai smiled and noticed that the green-haired boy liked Ning Fei, and his guess was correct. The green-haired boy smiled and replied that it was not so, since he had just met her. Du scratched the back of his head and noticed that there were too many people around. At that moment, their conversation was interrupted by music from an approaching car. The approaching car caused mistrust and uncertainty in everyone, as they suspected that something. The bandits got out of the car, giving the impression of a mass, and their number grew. The beaten man and the men in tuxedos stood up to protect the main character, and their appearance frightened the band. Xiaoshan explained that they called these people to help Du, and it turned out the fight ended quickly, and the men in tuxedos, who didn't even try very hard. Xiaoshan's acquaintances said that it was time for him to leave, but his white-haired friend asked him to stay. The rich friend put his hand on the protagonist's shoulder and introduced him. Chung extended his hand and handed over his business card, saying that if the guy needed help, he was always ready to help since the green-haired boy replied that if Chun needed help, he was also ready to help. Hao Shuai had already drunk too much and couldn't stand on his feet, so Xiaoshan decided to support him. And the protagonist, Xiaoshan, agreed and wished the protagonist to be careful on his way home, promising to meet him for lunch tomorrow. And the main character smiled and went home. Now he was a rich man, and he was thinking about how to spend his money. In the alley, the guy noticed a girl with blue hair running straight towards him, and guys were chasing her. He stood motionless, watching what was happening, and waiting to see what would happen next. Do you wondered what was going on, and whether you should help the girl, not knowing whether she was good? The girl attacked the main character, trying to grab him, and the guy stood there and didn't know what to do. The green-haired boy tried to activate his precognitive abilities, but for some reason, they stopped working. The stranger knocked him down and grabbed the blue-eyed guy by the neck, preparing to strike. She stopped, realizing that the person in front of her was an ordinary civilian guy, and heard that their pursuers were already close. The blue-haired girl took something out of her pocket and told the protagonist to give it to Chief Wong of the Jiangnan police station. Yu took the thing that was handed over in his hands and looked at it strangely, and he was a little confused since all this happened, and a male voice was heard saying that the girl would never be able to escape even if she wanted to. They were surrounded by 3 men, their hostile mood palpable, creating the man in the tuxedo stated that the transferred item should be with the main character. He would take care of it. The rest immediately accepted the order and began to carry it out, demonstrating efficiency. The girl apologized to the green-haired guy for dragging him into a dangerous situation. The stranger was in an aggressive mood and pulled out a knife, preparing to attack the guy. The blow was fast, and the protagonist barely dodged it, which showed that the opponent was an experienced fighter. If the eye of Duyuya didn't foresee the next 6 seconds, the knife would pierce his throat, and he would die. The man with the knife was stunned and surprised, not understanding how the boy was able to dodge his attack. The villain launched a series of attacks, but the green-haired boy activated his eye of foresight, dodging each blow. The main character carefully watched every movement of the enemy, but was already starting to get tired, just like the man with the knife. The stranger was shocked and could not understand how the guy dodged his attacks. Duyu smiled and asked the villain if there was anything else he could do, inviting him to demonstrate his ability. The man with the knife shouted that the green-haired guy was not an ordinary person, and he was collaborating with the girl. The blue-eyed boy thought, realizing that the situation was dangerous and risky, and he looked at the girl, seeing that she was holding her stomach, where a knife wound was visible. The green-haired guy approached the girl and offered to call a doctor, but she refused, saying that the main character was thinking about what to do, and suddenly an idea came to him on how to save the bandits came running with reinforcements, but Duyu and the girl were no longer there, which caused the men to order someone to find them. Duyu brought the girl to his apartment, and the stranger asked the guy to help her put a bandage on the wound. The blue-eyed guy was embarrassed and said he didn't want to do that because it would require taking off her clothes, and they did. The blue-haired girl looked at the guy and said that she didn't even mind it, since saving her was more important now, otherwise she might. The protagonist agreed to help and warned the girl not to move so as not to worsen the bleeding while he was helping her. The green-haired guy began to undress the girl to examine the wound and treat it. The girl began asking the boy questions about his martial arts experience and how he was able to defeat his opponent. While the guy replied that he did a little martial arts, introduced himself, and then asked the girl's name, and she replied that her name was Yunqing. The wound was serious and Yunqing could die. She had to think of something to save herself. Duyu remembered that his eyes had the ability to heal himself, but could this ability be used to heal other people? Looking at the girl, he decided to take a risk and use his ability, and a blue light enveloped Yunqing, and her wound began to heal. The young man with blue eyes managed to cure the girl, but he felt extremely tired and light was already penetrating through the curtains of his window when the protagonist woke up, feeling the first rays of the sun. The green-haired boy looked around. Yesterday, he fell asleep right on the chair, and he has a slight headache. Doo stood up from his chair, realizing that he had probably had too much to drink yesterday, and he thought that everything that happened might have been a dream. However, it didn't matter anymore, and the guy decided to go and quit his job. Arriving at work, the protagonist finds a disgruntled man with a diary. The man smiled when he saw Doo and said that director Fan wanted to talk to him. The green-haired guy ignored the smoking man's words and walked on. The blue-eyed guy is sure that this man will betray him again, because he is someone who likes to impress others. Doo thought it was good that he was rich and decided to stay at work just to show off his strength. The man thought that only the green-haired guy was trying to fight him, but he couldn't understand his mistakes. The guy went into the principal's office and Fan told him to apologize to Zhang at the morning meeting, and Doo agreed. The protagonist said that he would immediately go down and publicly apologize to Zhang at the morning meeting. They went down to the factory workers together, and Fan started the meeting by reporting the incident that had happened, and that Doo realized his mistake and is going to apologize. The director invited Doo, came to him, and demanded a public apology for his behavior. The young man smiled and agreed, already knowing what he would tell everyone when he went out to the director. Doo came out, greeted everyone, and said that he believed he had done nothing wrong in the situation with Zhang. Everyone was surprised by Doo's words. Yuya, especially director Fong and Zhang, did not understand how the guy could afford such a thing. The blue-eyed boy continued that if he had not been restrained, he would have beaten Zhang, and Doo said that he did not regret what he... The green-haired guy, without emotion, threw a letter of resignation at the director. Fan still couldn't understand how the guy could afford such a thing, and he stood motionless, looking at the letter. The angry director told the boy to stop and asked Doo, is he going to work more? The guy in the white shirt approached the director and explained that the university had provided Fan with an internship report, and the man shouted Doo to get him back to work. He still had the internship report, and he asked the guy if he wanted to keep his job and diploma. The protagonist replied that the director could do whatever he wanted, and now the green-haired guy was rich and was going to start his own business. Fan was very annoyed when he heard the mobile phone ringing in his pocket. The director took out his phone and saw that it was the secretary calling, and he answered the call and asked what he needed. The secretary said they were looking for an intern named Doo, and they came to pick him up from work. Fan got very angry, told Secretary Lee that the guy had just quit and insulted him, then left. The blonde man ordered Doo to quickly catch up Yuya and return him to work, and if the guy comes back without him, the director will write in his internship report that he did not work well. Fan was beside himself with rage and started yelling at all the other workers, demanding that they bring the guy back. Doo was walking down the road, his hands in his back pockets, when a guy ran up to him, yelling at him to stop. The green-haired boy turned around in surprise, not understanding what was happening and what this man wanted from him. A whole crowd of people ran after him, shouting for him not to run away and to join them. The protagonist began to run away from this crowd, assuming that the director had gathered them to attack him. The blue-eyed guy noticed the bus and quickly entered it to get away from his pursuers. As the crowd of men approached the bus, it drove away and Doo waved his hand at them. Doo said that if they wanted to catch up with him, they should dream, and he finished third in the 5,000 meters. He received a call and answered, and after greeting Xiao Shui, she asked why he quit. Hearing her question, Xiao Shui revealed that she was the general manager of the Sunward Group, and Fong Degua wanted to get him back to work, and she suggested that he come to her office. The protagonist was shocked that Xiao Shui is the general manager of the company, and he wanted to visit its office. The office where the girl worked was just a few steps away from him, so he decided to go there. Du came to Xiao Shui, scratched his head slightly, and greeted her, feeling awkward. The pink-haired girl suggested that he call her his sister when no one was around. Du explained to his sister that he approached her because he wanted to start his own business and no longer wanted to work. Xiao Shui advised him to gain work experience before starting his own business, but if he wanted to start now, the pink-haired girl told him to call if he needed help, and that Xiao Yao was also looking for him to invite him to dinner. The protagonist thanked him and said that he understood his sister Zhao's words. Yao. And now he will head towards her. Du promised to let him know if he needed his sister's help and said goodbye. The green-haired guy said that he would definitely ask for help if needed and left. The girl reciprocated and promised to call Du. When he has free time, treat him to dinner. The guy was happy with such promises from Xiao. Shui assured that he would definitely come as soon as he was called. We walk into a gym where people train to master martial arts and become stronger. Xiao Yao trains the men, telling them to keep their arms straight and those behind them to keep up. Du came and greeted his sister Xiao Yao. He was glad to meet her. The girl asked why it took him so long to get here and offered to dress the green-haired guy in a kung fu uniform, but Du wasn't particularly interested in it. Xiao Yao did not accept the protagonist's refusal, so he was forced to put on his uniform and go into the ring with her. The blue-eyed guy was surprised by the girl's determination. She noticed that the blue-eyed guy was very calm and warned him to be prepared for anything. The sister decided to kick the main character hard in the head while he was not expecting it. But Du dodged the girl's powerful blow by activating his abilities. Xiao Yao tried to test the protagonist and hit him with her hands, but he easily dodged every blow with a smile on his face. The men in the hall noticed their fight and started discussing it. One of them said that the main character dodged all the blows, and this could be. The protagonist raised his hands and asked Sister Xiao Yao, couldn't he just give up? The girl replied that he could not admit his defeat without a fight, and let him show courage and show her a good fight. The stranger said that he liked the girl's determination and said that he came to the Xinyang Hall to fight a certain woman who was considered a kung fu. The sister asked the man who he was and where he came from. She was interested in what he could do. The man introduced himself as Jin. Wu Mu Jin, a Muay Thai instructor from Shuanghu Gym, expressed his admiration. Blue-haired guy talks about Jin's fame, Wu Mu Jina, who took second place in the Thai Muay Thai tournament. Xiao Yao agreed to meet him in the ring, her fighting spirit high. A crowd of people gathered in the ring, supporting both sides. The girl students shouted that their teacher was the best, while Jin Wu challenged Xiao Yao, inviting, and the students of Jin the Wus demanded that their coach conquer this woman and show how strong men can be. Du looked at the girl and realized that she was in for a hard time, that a very difficult battle was ahead. The girl decided to kick the man hard, confident that this blow would defeat him. Jinwoo noticed where the girl's punch was aimed and responded with his own punch to block the attack. Zhao's leg Yao and the fist of Jin, the Wu collided with impressive force and momentum, creating a Xiao Yao was amazed by such strength and praised the man. So she started throwing quick punches from all sides, as if there were 4 girls in the ring. But the man blocked all of Zhao's attacks. Yao asked if she had any other tricks. A smile appeared on Jin's face. Wu, when he said that if this is all the girl can do against him, then it is now his turn to attack. The man gave the girl a powerful kick, his strongest move, which he used to defeat many opponents. The girl found it hard to hold on after such a powerful blow, and she flew back. The sister was in pain and exhausted, but her fighting spirit kept her on her feet. One of the students shouted that Mujin was a great teacher, and the girl could not compare to him in strength. Do you also realize that Xiao Yao was no match for this man, but there was only hope for luck? Jin Wu said he had won and suggested that they finish the fight. Xiao Yao replied that Jin Wu can only defeat her in his dreams, and that she is out of shape due to her women's days. The main character was shocked by what he heard, considering it a dirty move. She is trying to get away with it. The girl said that she was unable to continue the fight and offered her friend to fight for her, considering their strength equal, and if Jin Wu defeats him, then she admits her defeat. The man agreed, but added a condition. If the guy loses, they will hang a sign on the door that says, "Don't so good," like in the Hall Schwaru. Jin Wu smiled, thought for a moment, and suggested that Coach Xiao would be better. Yao will become. Xiao Yao smiled back and said, "Let Du win first. You, and then they will talk." Then the sister took the protagonist by the shoulder and promised to take care of him if the guy defeated Jin Wu. Then she will become. She continued, saying that the girl's happiness was now in his hands, and that he should act like a man so as not to disappoint. The green-haired guy didn't quite understand the girl's words, but the very thought that they could become a couple confused him. The man did not want to wait for the protagonist to prepare, and so he rushed into battle, striking with his hand. Fist of Jin Wu was very close to Du's face. Yuya, he didn't expect such a quick attack. But the blue-eyed boy dodged the attack that almost hit him. Xiao Yao was dissatisfied and shouted that the man should be ashamed of himself for such a mean blow, but he still missed. Do you realize that he would have to engage in battle with Jin Wu? The man threw multiple kicks, but the green-haired boy dodged each one. Jin Wu was a little angry but still praised the guy, asking why he was only dodging. The girl shouted to the main character that she had thought everything through, and when he won, they were going to get married. The guy, dodging the blows, realized that he needed to win this fight. Green-haired guy needs to defeat Jin Wu, otherwise he might lose one eye today. The man shouted that if the boy was not going to attack, he would continue to hit him until he did. Do you notice that Jin Wu lost control, and that gave him a chance? If he dodged the blow, he could respond. The protagonist focused on the fight, waiting for the man to strike, and then strike back. The blue-eyed boy easily dodged Jin's attack. Wu realized that now was his chance to hit the man. The young man clenches his fist, gathering strength, and with energy and determination, delivers a punch to the man's face. Following a strong blow, the man loses his balance and falls backwards onto the ring. And after, no one could even imagine that Du will defeat Jin Wu, and everyone was shocked by the outcome of the battle. The entire hall screamed in admiration, and no one had ever been able to defeat Coach Jin with one blow, and even the girl. Xiao Yao touched the green-haired boy on the head and noticed that he was as good a fighter as she was. Du couldn't understand why his sister decided to change her outfit and asked the girl why she made such a decision. The girl hesitated and replied that they needed to change clothes and have a photo shoot for the wedding. The protagonist was slightly shocked by this statement and told her that she was like a sister to him and that this was inappropriate. The friend was just joking, and she wanted to change clothes and treat the guy to dinner as a token of gratitude for a good fight. They changed their clothes and went for a walk, and Du didn't even pay attention to the girl, since his sister was wearing a very beautiful. The blue-eyed boy didn't expect that Xiao Yao may be so beautiful, so he couldn't say anything. The green-haired guy noticed a clothing store and wanted to go buy himself a suit. Du walked out of the fitting room in a suit and asked Xiao Yao, "What does he look like?" Xiao Yao replied that the man was good in any clothes, but in a decent suit, he was simply irresistible, and the store employee. The blue-eyed boy noticed that sister was going to buy him a suit, but Du asked her not to do it because he was too expensive. The girl replied that she was his sister and was ready to spend money on him. The total amount was $320,000, but there was a promotion going on, and they were given a discount, and the main character was shocked by such a price. Sister turned to Du, asked him to lend her one favor. The green-haired boy smiled and agreed to fulfill the request. A friend asked Du will act as her lover at a meeting with a man. The main character was shocked by the proposal made by his girlfriend and could not understand why she wanted it. Xiao Yao walked into the cafe and took a seat opposite a guy with glasses who was chatting animatedly and smiling. The dark-haired man felt genuine satisfaction that the girl had agreed to meet with him. You with a bouquet of flowers and noticed that she looked beautiful today. The beauty looked at the green-haired guy in surprise and noted that she did not expect to see him here. The man in glasses noticed the guy and could not understand what was going on here and who this guy with blue eyes was. Du introduced himself and explained to the man that he was Zhao's boyfriend. Yao was just very... The stranger adjusted his glasses and introduced himself, and his name was Zhou Ku, and he asked Du Ya. The green-haired guy replied that he had completed his studies abroad and was planning to open his own business. Xiao Yao apologized to Zhou Ku as her family forced her to come to the meeting, and added that the guy with glasses should just treat it as a friendly meeting. After that, the main character got into the car, and his girlfriend came up to him, asking what his plans were for today. The blue-eyed guy replied that he had a lot of things to do today, and he wouldn't be able to keep her company. And then he said, "Tu es sincère, Yuya," believing that the guy didn't like her. The protagonist arrived at the park and found that Xiaoshan was already there, sitting behind the wheel of his car. The green-haired guy greeted his friend with a smile and asked him what he was wearing. Du got into the car and drove with his friend. Xiaoshan said that the blue-eyed guy called him a show-off, but he is the same. Xiaoshan warned the protagonist to keep his distance when they arrived at the meeting place today because he didn't feel confident around him. They arrived at their destination and got out of the car, then headed into the establishment to meet people. The blue-eyed guy asked if Xiaoshan was here for the playing stones or a blind date, and the friend put his hand on the protagonist's shoulder and replied that the white-haired guy fixed his hair and said that he was going to pick up a couple of girls at this event. Xiaoshan advised Du to take a walk while he went to look for the girl, and they agreed to meet later, and the rich friend warned jade stones are scattered on the tables, but the amount of valuable material in each varies, and knowing which one to choose could make you rich. The green-haired boy walked around the establishment, examining the playing stones, and with his left eye that sees through everything, he picked up the stone and began to examine it, believing that luck was on his side and he could make money anywhere. The blue-eyed guy looked at all the stones and began to choose, and in one stone there was a small fragment of jade. In another there were two He noticed a stone that interested him and decided to check it out. The protagonist called a seller to buy a stunning stone, which he thought would bring him a lot of money. Ku approached him, which was an incredible coincidence, and asked what he was doing here. Du smiled and replied that he was glad to see Ku, and then asked whether he was Ku decided to find out whether the guy knew anything about appraising stones or if he was just having fun. The blue-eyed guy admitted that he knew nothing about evaluating stones, so he decided to try his luck. The man in glasses, who was the boss of this establishment, explained to the main character. The man with glasses realized that Du did not understand stones and decided to teach him a lesson. The employee of the establishment asked the blue-eyed guy if he was going to cut the stone. The protagonist gave a positive answer, but Ku was dissatisfied with his decision and warned him. Du replied that it was his money and his decision, and thought that luck was on his side and that the stone would end. Ku began to tremble and laugh, and then told the guy to come down to earth. The man in glasses decided to bet that if there was no jade in the stone, the main character would. The green-haired boy agreed to these conditions and suggested that if the jade was found, then Ku would also have to kneel. Ku agreed to these conditions and decided that he would shame the guy in front of everyone, since Du had taken his girl away from him. The main character was confident in himself and his choice, and smiling, he said that now we will see who is. Many people gathered for this confrontation, and a worker took a stone to begin cutting it. Du watched as the stone was cut, waiting for the expression on the man with glasses. The employee of the establishment cut the stone and announced that the young man was very lucky. The quality of the jade was excellent, and the blue-eyed boy turned to Ku. Ku was furious and didn't know what to do, wondering how the guy could find such a jade stone. The man with glasses simply ran away, pushing people aside in his path, and warned that Du would regret it. The main character approached the employee of the establishment and offered him to finish cutting here to show off to everyone. Du wanted to buy the jade because of its excellent quality. The green-haired boy was pinned against the wall by the crowd and asked Xiaoshan to come to his aid. At this time, Xiaoshan wanted to buy a piece of jade for 5 million, but a fair-haired guy came up, and Xiaoshan raised the bid to 10 million, unwilling to give up the Han jade. Zhong knew. Han Zhong agreed to give the jade to Xiaoshan, thinking that the latter was foolishly spending money on such a stone. The fair-haired guy asked Su Qin to go on a date with him, since she was staying in Chang'an for a few days. Xiaoshan asked Su Qin if she liked the material and promised to commission a craftsman to make something for her from it. Su Qin replied that jade was not worth that much money and she did not approve of buying it, calling it stupid. Suddenly, the protagonist came and said that his friend should worry about money, agreeing with Su Qin's opinion. The green-haired boy placed his hand on his friend's shoulder and shared his thoughts with him, claiming that although the boy might not be liked by the girl called Mr. Han to look at the new jade that had just been found. The protagonist wondered if his stone had been cut correctly, thinking about what they said about it, and was surprised at how quickly it was cleaned. Han Zhong looked at the stone and asked Ku if he was the one who lost the jade, and the man with glasses confirmed his words. The fair-haired gentleman noticed that the stone had a good color and transparency, and Su Qin ran up to the stone and expressed her delight, calling it a beautiful jade. Du walked up to the stone, satisfied with its quality, and thought that it was his stone. The girl asked the worker where the owner of the stone was, expressing a desire to discuss the price with him, And the man replied that the young man had been scared off by the Han Zhong suggested that Xiaoshan and Su Qin try their luck again, noticing that the girl had shown sympathy towards the stone. The guy advised Xiaoshan not to discuss his financial difficulties. That Xiaoshan was annoyed by the fair-haired guy, but the protagonist calmed him down, explaining that the stone belonged to him. The gray-haired guy approved of the plan and said that he was looking forward to the opportunity to implement it. The main character approached the man to take his stone and sell it profitably. Han Zhong noticed the owner of the stone appear and came over to ask how much he wanted for it. And do you? The guy introduced himself and warned that if he was insulted, he might not leave here, and so it was better to think before naming a price. Do you replied that he was simply carrying out his master's orders, and Han Zhong asked the blue-eyed boy who his master was. The green-haired guy introduced Mr. Xiaoshan, after which the fair-haired guy mockingly replied that they met again. Xiaoshan looked at the protagonist and said that before beating a dog, you need to find out who its owner is. A friend approached Han Zhongnu, offered 100 million yuan for the stone. The fair-haired boy said that he could give the stone to Su Qin if she valued it so much. Su Qin thanked Xiaoshan, but refused the gift, considering it too expensive. The girl expressed dissatisfaction that she was not warned about the joke on Han Zhong, and Xiaoshan replied that they would invite her next time. Xiaoshan introduced Du Yu and Su Qin, saying that they were very good friends, and the protagonist was glad to meet the girl. An acquaintance said that an old childhood friend, Su Qin, who was known to the Su and Mo families had maintained friendly relations for many generations. However, the Su family's influence was much greater. The main character said that Xiaoshan had mentioned her many times. In response, Su Qin noted that Xiaoshan had shown similar attention to her since she was a child, and it seemed that nothing had changed during this. The blonde invited the main character to go shopping with him and relax a little. Dee replied that he didn't want to be a third wheel, so he would rather mind his own business than join them. The blue-eyed guy went shopping, looking for stones, in particular jade, to earn his money. He decided to buy a large quantity of stones so that all the jade would be his, and thus become rich. The protagonist, looking at the stones, realized that their value exceeded 200 million yuan. Someone called out to the green-haired boy, and he looked around to see who it was and what they wanted from him. It turned out to be Han Zhong, who heard that his subordinate lost to the blue-eyed guy in a bet, suggested Do you make a new bet, this time with him. The protagonist noted that his previous bet had not yet been fulfilled, so he was waiting for the conditions. Du began to suspect the boys were up to no good and realized that without his abilities, he wouldn't be able to deal with them. The fair-haired boy told Zhou Ke that he had made such a bet himself, so now it was time to pay up. Han Zhong threatened the man with glasses that if he didn't pay now, he would lose his job. Zhou Ke reluctantly agreed, knowing that he had to fulfill the conditions to avoid losing his job. The bespectacled man knelt down and apologized to Mr. Du, expressing regret for his actions. The dark-haired man was deeply embarrassed, but promised himself that one day he would make the blue-eyed. The green-haired guy replied that he would now take part in the next bet. Han Zhong explained the rules of the game to him. Everyone chooses 3 unprocessed stones, after which they process them all, and the one whose total value of the stones is higher wins. And the conditions remain the same, and the loser must kneel before the winner and apologize. The blue-eyed boy agreed, realizing that Han Zhong tries to deceive him, but his intuition will not fail him. Du began to carefully examine the stones, trying to choose the best quality ones. Xiaoshan and Su Qin approached him, and their friend asked the protagonist why he was choosing stones from this zone, after which he explained that he heard about their bet and wanted to help. But the green-haired guy replied that he could handle it himself. He was confident in his victory and did not need help. The main character said that he grew up in the mountains and always had a special attachment to stones. Xiaoshan mentioned that the Han family had a large company in the jade industry and asked what would happen if the guy lost. The blue-eyed guy replied that in that case he would just leave, but Du assured that he knows what he is doing and has the necessary skill. The friend said that if he needed help, he would definitely let me know. At this time, Zhouku approached Mr. Han and said that the stones were ready, to which the fair-haired guy replied that they should forget about the previous. Zhouku announced that he had banned dealings in stones that experts have been Du realized that they were being deceived, but he saw no way out of the situation, since the villains had already thought of it. The green-haired guy decided to take another look at the stones to better understand which ones to choose. The protagonist diligently and persistently searched for stones with the highest content of valuable jade, aiming for victory. He found the stones he needed and realized that the experts from the Han family were not very knowledgeable.